In the deepest corner of Windsor's restricted archives, Princess Anne stumbles upon a sealed envelope untouched for decades. It bore her father's crest, the Queen's signature, and a chilling instruction to be revealed only in dire consequence. What she discovered inside would send shockwaves through the monarchy and ignite a storm that could end Camilla's influence forever. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began as a routine visit to the archives, a quiet inspection of some ceremonial papers, nothing more. But Anne, ever meticulous and instinctively alert, noticed something that pulled at her attention. A side cabinet she had never seen opened, its lock showing signs of wear, not use. Inside it was a solitary box wrapped in dark velvet and bound with the emblem of the Queen's private estate. It wasn't supposed to be there, and more importantly, it wasn't supposed to be touched. But Anne had the authority and the will to proceed. She signed the release form in silence and opened the box with trembling fingers, unsure whether she was about to uncover a family relic or a royal time bomb. What she found was nothing short of earth-shattering. Dated during Queen Elizabeth II's final decade, and co-witnessed by two senior, but now deceased royal advisors, the document Anne held was marked Private Royal Directive, Crown Estate Succession. The phrasing was clear. Should political instability or contested authority arise within the royal family, the Queen had instructed that the full oversight and benefits of the Crown Estate be passed not to Charles but directly to Prince William. There was no ambiguity. The decree bore the Queen's full signature, the royal seal, and a handwritten clause in the margins that read simply, "For the good of the institution and the people it must serve." Anne froze. Her heart pounded as the gravity settled in. This wasn't just about land or assets. The Crown Estate represents billions in property and power, ceremonial, economic, symbolic. And the decree completely bypassed the sitting monarch and his consort. The implications were devastating. Camilla's entire influence, already controversial, now faced a terminal threat. And worse, if Charles knew about this and still proceeded as though nothing had changed, then Anne was staring into a scandal not of mistake, but of willful deception. The final clause cut through her like ice, a protection clause, stipulating that if the decree was discovered after the Queen's passing, it was to be considered active immediately, unless formally revoked by her in her lifetime. There was no record of such a revocation. No parliamentary counter-order, no official amendment. That meant this decree was alive. And with that, Anne understood something chilling. She now held the power to realign the future of the monarchy, and in doing so, potentially declare open war within the palace itself. But if Anne thought discovering the document was the climax, she had no idea the fire it would spark within palace walls. The moment word leaked of Anne's visit to the archive, Camilla's circle sprang into action. Phone calls were made, files were quietly moved, and an entire network of loyal aides began scrubbing any trace of the decree's existence, but they were already too late. Anne had made copies. The ripple was instant. Within hours of Anne's discreet withdrawal from the archives, a coded alert reached Camilla's inner circle. The Princess Royal had accessed restricted vaults under full sovereign authority. The phrase alone was enough to spark panic. Senior aides close to the Queen consort began scouring the palace's internal security logs, tracking what Anne might have seen. One name stood out on every flagged document: William. The full extent of the Queen's intentions had never been meant to surface in this way, certainly not during Charles's reign, and especially not now with Camilla's role. Growing ever more delicate, as the sun set over Buckingham, a covert operation unfolded behind layers of formality and protocol. Digital files were mysteriously marked for reclassification. Paper copies began disappearing from quiet corners of the Royal Estate Office. One aide was overheard in hushed tones requesting a total cleanse of Section R. But none of it would matter. Anne, ever one step ahead, had already produced 3 certified copies of the decree and stored them in 3 separate royal residences, including one in Scotland, beyond English jurisdiction. The damage was done, the truth had legs, and it had begun to run. What rattled Camilla most wasn't the document itself, it was the implication. If the Queen had truly intended to bypass Charles and empower William directly through the Crown estate, then Camilla's entire foundation, both symbolic and strategic, would begin to crack. She summoned 2 trusted aides in the late hours, demanding a timeline of Anne's actions. Her tone, once composed, now brimmed with edge. A question slipped through clenched teeth. Does Anne even have the right to access that material? One advisor offered a cautious answer, citing her status as the late Queen's executor in certain personal matters. Camilla's silence afterward was deafening. Charles was informed but said nothing. No order, no denial, no instruction, just silence. That silence, measured, deliberate, and almost grim, confirmed to Camilla something far worse than bet. Real, Charles had known all along. Whether out of guilt, fear, or allegiance to a long-buried promise, he had kept this from her. And in doing so, he had left her exposed. Anne, sensing the storm brewing, didn't wait. She requested a closed-door meeting with a high-ranking royal aide, a man known to have served both the Queen and the current king. The exchange was tense, laced with veiled warnings. He urged her to step back, cautioning her about igniting a conflict that could end more than reputations. But Anne was unshaken, her voice, firm and cold, delivered a single line. The Queen's word wasn't a suggestion. Clarence's house would become the site of the first true confrontation. In a meeting meant to remain private, Anne and Camilla exchanged more than just words. They traded truths, accusations, and years of restrained resentment. Camilla questioned Anne's loyalty, accusing her of fracturing the family. Anne responded with a chilling reminder: loyalty to the Crown means defending the Queen's will, not protecting personal ambition. And with that, the air shifted. What once simmered now burned. But Anne was not acting alone, and her next move would involve the one royal whose silence could change everything. When Anne hands the decree to William, his reaction is unreadable. He scans the pages, his jaw tightens. But then, in a stunning twist, he hands it back and says only 3 words: "I need time." What was holding him back? And why did he fear what came next? Tea. The moment Anne stepped through the doors of Kensington Palace, there was a shift in the air. William had already been briefed about her findings not by staff, but by Anne herself in a single cryptic message: "It's about the estate. We need to talk." Now, face to face, the envelope sat between them like a loaded weapon. Anne said little. She let the decree speak for itself. And as William read line after line, detail after detail, his breath slowed, his posture stiffened. The signatures were clear. The Queen's intentions were unequivocal. It was all real. The Crown estate, its vast wealth, power, and legacy had been assigned to him. Not his father, not the monarchy in its traditional line. Him. And yet, something in William's face revealed the fracture forming inside him. A conflict not just of law or duty, but of identity. How could he accept a decree that would bypass his father, a man who had waited his entire life to be king? How could he take control of an empire that had always been his inheritance, but never in this manner, never in this silence? He turned to Anne, voice low, asking the question that revealed the weight pressing down on him: why now? Anne didn't answer with certainty. Instead, she offered the only thing she had left: the Queen's written will, her sealed authority, and her whispered fears. And then came the memory. William, still in his early 20s, standing outside a drawing room at Balmoral, overhearing his grandmother's voice in conversat. "Ion with Anne." The words were hushed but unmistakable. He will have to choose between the Crown and comfort. And if he chooses wrongly, the estate must go to the boy. He hadn't understood it then, but now, those words played on a loop in his mind, echoing across the chasm between duty and love. Anne urged him to see beyond the present discomfort. She reminded him that the Queen had acted not out of vengeance but out of foresight, that this wasn't about Charles or Camilla, it was about survival. The survival of the monarchy, the preservation of its independence, and the transfer of trust to someone the Queen believed would protect the people's legacy with clarity and strength. Anne pleaded with her nephew not to let emotion cloud what was already in motion. But William wasn't ready. His eyes lingered on the decree one last time before sliding it back toward Anne. "I need time," he said quietly. almost to himself. Yet, even as William hesitated, the royal machine began to unravel, and a second document emerged to raise the stakes higher. A faded parchment tucked within the Queen's private writing desk reveals an unsettling truth. The original decree had a companion, a personal addendum written in Elizabeth's own hand. In it, she warns of a manipulative force she feared would poison the crown's future. The discovery wasn't part of any official search. It came quietly, from a source long forgotten by the public, a former royal archivist, dismissed during the early days of Charles's reign, who had kept a single piece of contraband hidden in fear and in loyalty. The message came to Anne anonymously. A single envelope slipped into a trusted aide's hands, marked only with a date, 2 weeks before the Queen's final illness. Inside was a copy of a handwritten note, yellowed with age but unmistakable in its delicate script. It was the Queen's handwriting, sharp, direct, emotionally restrained, and what it said changed everything. The note didn't replace the decree. It didn't even reference it directly. Instead, it read like a confessional, an unspoken testament to the emotional turmoil Elizabeth endured during her final years. In it, she expressed her worry over a growing shadow at the center of the family, and her fear that influence and ambition were beginning to outweigh duty and restraint. Without naming names, she wrote of persistent persuasion surrounding her son, and how his clarity had begun to wane. She feared decisions were no longer his alone, and so she'd made a contingency plan. If ever it becomes clear that loyalty to the crown is at risk, she wrote, William must be the anchor. He must not be manipulated. He must hold the estate. The meaning was clear. The decree had not been an impulsive act, but a calculated safeguard. And now Anne knew without doubt that the Queen's intentions had been shaped not only by governance, but by a deep and personal mistrust. The veiled language was piercing. It spoke of titles granted too quickly, faces welcomed without ancestral weight, and a shifting sense of decorum. No name was necessary. The reference to Camilla, her influence, her ambition, her proximity to the monarch, was too pointed to ignore. Anne sat alone after reading it, feeling both vindicated and burdened. This wasn't a mere matter of succession anymore. It was a moral reckoning. If she moved forward, if she exposed the Queen's final fears, she would not only destabilize the present order, she would strike at the heart of Charles's world. But she also understood now why William had hesitated. He had sensed it before the rest at the cost of carrying this truth. She delivered the copy of the handwritten note to William the next morning. No words, just the parchment. William read it slowly, twice, then folded it back along its creases, as if trying to restore a moment in time. His expression darkened. The question he had avoided could no longer be silenced. The Queen had prepared for this moment. But had his father known? And if he had, why did he let the fire grow? With the Queen's true intent finally illuminated, one question echoed louder than ever. Had Charles known all along? In a rare moment of vulnerability, King Charles finally speaks. Behind tightly locked palace doors, he admits the unthinkable, that he knew of the decree, and that the Queen made him swear never to contest it if William's leadership was ever at risk. But Camilla never agreed. The silence at Sandringham was not the kind that brought peace. It was the kind that trembled with anticipation. Charles had summoned both Anne and William under the cover of night, away from aides, press, and prying eyes. He knew the time for avoidance had passed. As the doors closed behind them, the king sat still, eyes heavy with a mix of regret and resolve. He spoke with none of the authority expected from a sovereign. Instead, he spoke like a son, a brother, and most painfully a man trapped between legacy and consequence. Yes, he whispered, I knew. Anne didn't flinch. William's stare narrowed, but neither interrupted him. Charles confessed that the Queen had shown him the decree in her private study just months before her passing. She was calm, resolute, even affectionate. She explained that the monarchy had entered an era where sentiment could no longer dictate strategy. She feared that if unchecked influence ever surrounded him, or if the public's trust began to waver, the crown estate must be protected through a direct transfer to William. Charles hadn't argued. He couldn't. Not then. Elizabeth had asked him for one thing, that he honour her decision in silence unless the monarchy remained stable. If that stability faltered, it would be William's call, not his. Now that time had come. And Charles, staring at his son with visible torment, asked only that they keep it from becoming a spectacle. If the world sees this divide, he warned, we may lose more than tradition, we may lose trust. Anne's face hardened, unwilling to offer guarantees. William remained stone still, his expression unreadable. But the atmosphere turned electric when the door swung open and Camilla stepped into the room. She hadn't been summoned, she had followed her instincts. What she walked into was not a conversation, it was a reckoning. She listened for no more than 2 minutes before the rage surfaced. How long have you kept this from me? Her voice sliced through the tension like a blade. Charles couldn't answer. His silence confirmed her greatest fear, that she had been locked out not only from power, but from truth. The cracks in their partnership became fractures. Camilla accused Anne of orchestrating a betrayal. Anne countered by revealing the Queen's handwritten addendum. Camilla turned to Charles for defense, but he offered none. It was never about you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It was about her and him. The room fell into a cold hush. What was once private had become combustible. Camilla stormed out, and the king remained behind a man with the crown, but no control over its future. He looked at William with quiet desperation. I won't stop you, he said, but I won't survive the storm if you don't lead it. But the matter was no longer confined to family. Whispers had reached Parliament, and powerful allies were choosing sides as MPs and royal advisers gather behind closed doors. A classified briefing exposes the full scope of the Queen's decree. Lega. Analysts are stunned. The document is airtight, and suddenly the question is no longer if William will take the estate, but when. The briefing was not scheduled, it was summoned. A collection of legal scholars, constitutional advisers, and select parliamentary figures were quietly invited into a locked chamber under the pretense of discussing ceremonial procedures. But what unfolded behind those oak-panelled walls sent a chill through every official present. Before them lay 2 documents. One, the formal decree signed and sealed by Queen Elizabeth herself. The other, a handwritten addendum written in her final months. Both aligned perfectly. Both made one thing undeniably clear. The monarch's intent was not only to restructure the custodianship of the Crown estate, but to ensure its protection rested with William alone. No ambiguity, no loopholes. The royal legal team, stunned by the precision of the documents, confirmed their legitimacy. The language was unflinching. And in a twist few were prepared for, the protection clause made any attempt to override the decree tantamount to disregarding the sovereign's will. Alarm bells began to ring across political factions. In hushed tones, select members of Parliament began debating the implications. What would it mean if William moved forward with enacting the transfer? Would it undermine Charles's rule? Would it provoke a public backlash or, worse, a constitutional crisis? Inside these secret sessions, tension mounted. The king's advisers, now trapped between loyalty and legal constraint, warned that any formal resistance to the Queen's directive could shatter public trust. The monarchy had survived wars, divorces, and scandals, but a documented rejection of Elizabeth's final safeguard? That could be catastrophic. Even those historically critical of the monarchy whispered caution. The nation was watching, and the press, though still in the dark, was growing restless. Camilla, now fully aware of the looming storm, turned to her own counsel. But behind closed doors, even her advisers hesitated. The Queen's documentation had been written with surgical clarity. Her legal standing, bolstered by decades of precedents, left little room to maneuver. And if they pushed too far, they risked a backlash that would not fall on William or Anne, but on Camilla herself. Still, her legal team quietly drafted a counter-argument rooted in succession technicalities, hoping to at least delay the inevitable. That hope was short-lived. Hours after the parliamentary review, a leaked excerpt from the classified briefing reached the press. It was only a paragraph, but it was damning. The Crown estate, by sovereign decree, is to be placed under the stewardship of Prince William, should instability threaten the monarchy's image or continuity. That single sentence exploded across media networks. Suddenly, every headline asked the same question. Had the Queen planned a secret succession? Public speculation turned toward Balmoral, the Queen's sacred retreat, where the original decree had been penned. Journalists, former aides, and foreign correspondents all converged, certain that the estate still held answers, and perhaps more secrets that had yet to come to light. And it was there, at the Queen's beloved sanctuary, that a long-forgotten secret would surface to change everything. In a secluded corner of Balmoral, a former lady-in-waiting steps forward with a revelation that shocks even Anne the Queen confided her deepest fears about the future to one person, and made arrangements that went far beyond just a written decree. Anne's journey to Balmoral was not a political act. It was personal. She needed clarity, but more than that, she needed peace. The walls of the estate whispered memories of her mother, of fireside conversations, long walks and unspoken bonds. It was there that the Queen had retreated when burdened, when the noise of the crown became too loud. Now Anne sought answers not in documents, but in the traces of the woman she had loved, protected, and at times challenged. She walked the grounds in silence, searching for something that would tell her this wasn't madness, that the decision to bring William into the light hadn't been a mistake. She found more than she expected. An elderly woman approached her quietly, hands trembling but voice steady. Anne recognized her immediately, one of her mother's most trusted attendants, dismissed quietly after the Queen's fun. Errol. The woman spoke with reverence, not hesitation. She had kept silent for years, but the leak in Parliament, the press frenzy, the looming war between kin, it was too much. What she told Anne altered everything. The Queen, she revealed, had spoken to her often about the future. Not as monarch to servant, but as woman to woman. She feared the line of succession might not be enough to hold the monarchy intact. She feared someone unnamed, but clearly marked by ambition, would compromise the very soul of the institution. And so, she made preparations. Beyond the written decree and addendum, there had been legal steps. No one had uncovered a trust structure, shielded from interference, designed to lock the Crown estate in a protective framework until William could act. It had been signed, sealed, and placed within a private vault known only to two people, the Queen and this woman. Anne listened, stunned. The confidant handed her a faded envelope and a single key. She said if they ever turned on each other, you'd know when it was time. Inside the envelope was a verification document, proof that the trust transfer had already begun weeks before the Queen's death. For Anne, it was overwhelming. She returned to the very room where she had last sat with her mother, just days before the Queen passed. The memory returned like a ghost, Elizabeth's tired eyes, the way she reached for Anne's hand and whispered, "Guard the future, not just the past." Only now did Anne understand what those words had meant. Elizabeth hadn't simply hoped the monarchy would endure, she had designed a contingency plan, a secretive but legal mechanism that couldn't be overturned, only enacted. And William was the linchpin. Anne walked out of Balmoral with more than documents. She carried a mission, one that was no longer up for debate, no longer theoretical. The Queen's will had already begun unfolding in silence, and the moment of reckoning had arrived. As the pieces of Elizabeth's master plan fell into place, William would finally make his move, and not everyone would survive the fallout. In a historic move, Prince William steps into the royal estate office flanked by Princess Anne and palace security. With a single signature, he enacts the Queen's decree. Camilla is absent, her invitation revoked. And inside the palace walls, alliances begin to fracture. The room was quiet, but the moment echoed like thunder through the foundations of monarchy. It was not a press event, not a staged gesture of power. It was real. A closed-door meeting, attended only by those who mattered: the estate trustees, the legal team, Anne and William. No fanfare, no photographers, just paper, ink, legacy, and history hanging in the balance. Anne stood at William's side like a sentinel, her presence unmistakably deliberate. It was a signal to all in attendance: the past and the future were standing together, prepared to execute the Queen's final command. As William took his place at Head of the table, there were no speeches, no ceremony. He reached for the decree, now bolstered by legal briefings, archival testimonies, and Balmoral's final revelation. He reviewed the last page, looked toward Anne, who gave a slight nod and signed. The ink hadn't dried before a subtle shift rippled through the institution. In that moment, the Crown estate was his, not as inheritance, but as designation, not as a son taking what was owed, but as a leader fulfilling what had been ordained. Outside the chamber, a scene unfolded that would never be officially documented, but would be whispered about for decades. Camilla, having learned of the meeting, attempted to enter. She was stopped by security and informed her clearance had been rescinded for the integrity of the sovereign directive. She didn't argue. She didn't shout. She simply turned, shoulders rigid, and walked away, not as queen consort, but as someone whose influence had, at last, met a barrier she could not breach. The symbolism was devastating. In the hours that followed, royal aides scrambled to interpret what had just occurred. The media, already circling from earlier leaks, erupted into speculation. Has William just become the true monarch? Became the question plastered across every headline. The public, weary from years of scandal and dysfunction, responded with cautious curiosity, some with celebration, others with alarm. The monarchy had not changed hands officially, but spiritually, something had been handed over. From Windsor, Charles watched without a word. No statement, no rebuke. Just quiet observation from behind the palace windows. Those closest to him noted a new expression, not defeat but release. As if he'd been waiting for this all along, unable to make the move himself, yet unwilling to stop it when it came. For William, the weight of what he had done didn't settle immediately. It came later in silence, in reflection, in the realization that the monarchy now rested differently upon his shoulders. But even as he prepared for the next phase, an envelope unsigned, unmarked, arrived at Kensington. Inside it, a single phrase, "To the next Guardian." But just as the dust seemed to settle, a mysterious package arrived at Kensington, addressed only to the next Guardian. Delivered by hand, an envelope containing Queen Elizabeth's final personal letter to William is opened in silence. In it, she reveals not only her faith in him, but a prophecy of what must come next. And with that, the battle for the monarchy enters its next phase. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant yet firm, each stroke carrying the weight of a monarch who had endured crises, outlived legends, and ruled through shadows and sunlight alike. The envelope, unsealed but marked with a single crest, had arrived without explanation. No courier claimed it. No aide had seen its sender. It was simply there. William knew before he touched it that it was from her. Dated 3 weeks before her passing, the letter was not addressed to the Prince of Wales or the future king. It was addressed to my grandson, the Guardian. The word alone sent a jolt through his spine. As he unfolded the parchment, the first line read not like an instruction, but a farewell. "If you are reading this, then my final wish is no longer mine to hold, it is yours to carry." The words that followed were laced with foresight and quiet sorrow. Elizabeth wrote of the enduring truth that every generation bears its own storm, its own betrayal, its own resurrection. She wrote of light and darkness walking hand in hand through the halls of power, and how the crown, while sacred, had always required protection not just from outside enemies, but from those who wear its symbols with impure hearts. She named Anne as the unwavering sentinel, the one who understood both burden and loyalty in their most painful forms. And she warned that danger would rise again, not with force, but with seduction. "Beware the one who speaks of unity, yet thrives in division," she cautioned. "Not all threats come with swords drawn." She offered no names, no titles, only the chilling certainty that the battle to secure the monarchy had not ended with a signature or decree. It had only shifted. William read the letter aloud to Anne and Catherine later that night. There were no tears, only silence, reverent, solid. And then, in a voice that did not shake, William spoke the words that would define his path. "She trusted me. I will not fail her." In that moment, the page turned not just in history, but in destiny. The monarchy had been reshaped not by force or spectacle, but by a quiet chain of revelations, bound together by legacy and sealed with sacrifice. And yet, as the family retreated into the quiet of night, a figure lingered in the background, unnoticed, unnamed, and watching. The next threat, as the Queen had written, was already forming. Not in open defiance, but in silence, waiting. The crown has been passed, but what price must be paid to keep it safe? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.